Hey, welcome inside to this Monday edition of Keeping It Real with Alexander Garrett. Now, first of all, before we get to my guest today, I want to just say big Northwell Health and the Rangers. The Rangers Town 5K, and my dad took a picture of me running with the Queen's Unisphere behind it, behind me in Flushing Meadows. It was a perfect picture. Cold, but a picture perfect day nonetheless. And, well, the Rangers have been struggling a little bit, but it was just a great day. Got to see Rod Jobert, I've known for 25 years. Duke Coughlin, I have this Ranger connection. It's pretty cool. Now, Duke, he also has a podcast. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I met you through the Tribe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the Tribe over on the Mighty Networks, I believe it's called.
And you reached out, and I said, yeah, let's kick it around a bit. So, first of all, you're a hockey guy. I know you cover a lot of sports. Rangers are having a tough year, but the Islanders here in New York are just on fire. And it's been an odd hockey year in that they're really good, and the Rangers are just not as good with their second pick in Kako. It's been a strange year with that.
Yeah, I mean, and it feels like the Islanders are kind of just trying to pick up a little bit of where they were last year. You know, they kind of rode the coattails of Robin Lehner, who I've personally gotten to see now that he's playing out there in Chicago and having quite the season as well. The crazy thing about hockey is momentum's a real thing, and if you can carry it over from kind of a surprising season the Islanders had last season, then the sky's the limit. And it seems like that entire locker room kind of has an idea of what their expectations are of each other, and they go out there and they play some darn good hockey. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's all good. So you do a podcast for what we won this week, and I've got to ask you, do you think Kaepernick won the weekend, or was he an outright flop? And wasn't it just a media show?
See, the thing that kind of gets me about Kaepernick is, the talent's always been there with the guy. It hasn't been that raw talent isn't there. The guy has an arm. It's just, I think the question for the last few years is, does this guy really want to play football? And I think when you have the NFL essentially giving you an open workout with 25 NFL teams essentially on an open platter in an NFL facility, ready to go, and you decide at the last minute that you want to move to a high school stadium because you want cameras there, and then you only get about 8 NFL scouts end up showing up because it's an hour away from the original workout. It makes you really question if the guy really wants to play. I mean, sure, he looked good throwing downfield 40 yards with no pressure in his face and, throwing to, wide receivers off the street. But, what college quarterback, what high school quarterback can't do that? I wonder what he's trying to get at this point. Is he trying to be on an NFL roster, or is he just trying to continue making noise in the media?
Well, he still has the grief. In fact, he said, I've been denied 3 years now. And I'm just like, no one cares about that anymore. And then he blames the NFL. But as you say, he moved it an hour away. So maybe it's not the NFL's fault this time.
Yeah, and the NFL gave him a golden opportunity to, showcase his skills. And, getting your name out there, obviously his name is out there, but getting your film out there to 25 NFL scouts that are actually going to watch you, that's a rare commodity that a lot of players, who want a second chance in the league don't have. And go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to say he probably knelt because he figured his career wasn't going anywhere now. He was actually just not as good with the Niners at that point. I think he just wanted to make noise. That's how I view it.
And I feel like that's the way a lot of people view it. I know you get into politics a good amount on your show. I have my own opinions on it. I try not to go too far to the, original opinion of why he kneeled and stuff like that, because I think an argument could be made of maybe what he did or like the reason he did it, could have been noble. But I have always thought from the beginning he was the wrong guy to try to make that noise, because you're right. At that point in his career, he was not nearly playing as good as he was. He was 1-10 his last season as a starter. And the guy was a turnover machine. He'd fumble almost on average at least once per start. And he got benched by Blaine Gabbert. I I
Right.
just I don't think that Colin Kaepernick isn't in the league because of a protest that a lot of players are continuing to do today that are continuing to play in the league, like say an Eric Reed. I think it's the fact that the guy kind of really fell off a cliff there the last few years he was playing.
We're talking with Duke Coughlin. He has this podcast as well called the What We Won This Week. Get into that a little bit because I know you've been working to get that word out there. What's your podcast about exactly?
So I try to really kind of cover, anything that's hot in the world of sports, like during the week. I actually got the name for my podcast from my buddy's podcast. He started this network that I'm in right now. He does What We Learned This Week with a couple of his buddies. So we all kind of have podcasts that revolve around that one. And, it's just a weekly podcast. Obviously the NFL has been red hot for the past, 11 weeks. So that's been a lot of what I've been covering. But, I'm going to start covering anything from, the winter meetings that are going to be coming up with baseball. I cover hockey. I cover basketball as it starts getting bigger, just across the board, man. I am fanatical about sports. I am always trying to keep my finger on the pulse. And, I'm
where's
trying.
What's your team market?
I really cover a lot of I'm a fan of a lot of Chicago sports. I try to not cover them a ton because I don't want my bias to show all the time. I listen to some radio shows where it's guys that are following their favorite teams and you just hear them say a lot of homerish things. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, you know what's interesting? My dad is actually a Bear and Cub fan. So when they won in 16, it was like he finally saw it. He's a little in the older range, but he finally saw it, and it was good. I got him a pennant after they won it, and Joe Madden just lost the clubhouse this year. There's no doubt. He might have even lost it even before this year. This is where it was all leading up to him leaving, wasn't it?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. Even going into this season. And I catch a lot of Brewers games, living up here in Wisconsin. So, I mean, I kind of saw how the whole NL Central unfolded. It seems like the team's been in the World Series hangover since they won it. And it's just kind of normal for like a Theo Epstein ran team. I mean, it happened out in Boston. And the second that all the trades that Theo made ended up turning into, old or bad contracts while you sent most of your farm away to try to win now, that's when Theo usually ended up leaving. So I'm really interested to see how the Cubs do this season. And I could see that being a deciding factor, whether Theo continues to be there or not.
So Girardi doesn't take the Cub job. By the way, one thought on Milwaukee. What people forget is that they went 15-2 after the Yelich injury, which I thought was pretty remarkable. I mean, Yelich was a beast, but to go 15-2 and, while they lost the wild card, to have that run still after Yelich was impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, they lost that wild card game to a pretty good ball club, if you ask me. Yeah, it is remarkable. And it's one of the great things about sports is how does a team respond when one of the top players, not only on your team, but in all of baseball goes down, especially in that close of a playoff run where up to that point, the Brewers season had been fairly disappointing. I think you saw everyone step up. I think you saw, Ryan Braun step up, a guy who has been hot and cold essentially for the past 3 years. I think you saw a rotation who was beaten and battered most of the season really come into their own. It was impressive to watch, man. And that's one of the great things about baseball and really any sport is just, how quickly some of these teams can go on a run and what, something that would end a lot of team seasons can be motivation to keep it going.
Well, and you say they lost to a great team. Well, they lost to the world champions, which we didn't know was going to happen at the time. We just thought this kid Juan Soto was going to be, the savior for that game. But man, he and Kendry Morales, they pushed this team to past the Dodgers, then past into the World Series, and to win the World Series in 7 the way they did it with Soto. It was just I felt great for Steven Strasburg because he finally had a rebound year and a championship year. I felt great for Ryan Zimmerman because he's been there since the start. And you got to feel great for Morales as well. You know, he had an injury in 2018 that almost sidelined him for his career, and he recovered from that. So some great stories on that national team. Now it looks like there's going to be a falling apart on that team because you got
Yeah,
Strasburg opting out, you've got Ryan not being picked up. It's very strange what's going on there now.
yeah. I mean, and I think you nailed it on the head. It was just there were so many great stories packed into that Nationals team. Like, and you're right. When they beat the Brewers in that game, nobody would have thought they would have made it past the Dodgers. Nobody would have thought they would have made it, as far as they did. Nonetheless, beat the Houston Astros in a World Series where only the home teams lost. Like, it's absolutely wild. And you're right. With Strasburg, opting out, with Rendon probably not returning. There's a lot of question marks out there, and it's crazy because you're right. You don't see that with championship teams very often, and especially in a year after you lose probably one of the biggest players in your franchise's history. It's
Right,
gonna
and
be
I think that he ended up being I hate to say a cancer, but he ended up being somewhat of a, he was not good for that clubhouse atmosphere, and it showed because the next year without Harper, they win the World Series, and Duke Coughlin, what they kept playing over and over again was we're going to win a ring in D.C.
oh my
by
God.
by Bryce, and he was so spot on, wasn't
Yeah, he really was, man. Bryce gonna look back at 2019 one year, like 1 year down the line. He's gonna just shake his head because everything that he said would happen essentially did happen. And yeah, I think one of the biggest moments, honestly, it might even be a bigger egg on his face than the fact that he said that he wanted to win a championship for Washington was how he reacted when he first came back to Washington for the first time, and then how his season ended by Washington knocking the Phillies like out of playoff contention. Like all around, Bryce Harper got paid. So I mean, he can't be that upset about it, but he was punching air watching the World Series and even the playoffs this season.
and clearly Kapler wasn't the fit over there, and now he's going to manage the Giants, which is kind of an interesting choice for San Francisco, considering they have to figure out where they're going to re-sign Madison Bumgarner. We'll see where that goes as well, right? So, the Phillies have been an enigma the last few years. They have the talent, but it just seems like they didn't have the managerial skill, if you will.
Well, it feels like with the Phillies, like they like went into the situation like trying to do a full rebuild, and it feels like the second that they had the Jake Arrieta signing, that was kind of the moment where they decided they were going to just try to start competing like immediately. And honestly, yes, the roster does have talent on it, but I just did not think they were quite yet there to be trying to aggressively like compete like they did. And the Jake Arrieta signing, a big signing like that at the time, that kind of sets you up and gives the expectation that you're trying to win. So when you go out and sign a Bryce Harper, the expectation is, well, it's time to win now. And when Kapler can't, make that happen, it's going to look like, and I'm not going to sit here and defend Kapler whatsoever. I don't think he is. I don't know what a lot of teams see in him, for him to keep getting jobs. But that being said, I don't think the Phillies were really there yet for them to start trying to hit this win now button. I still think they could have tried working it out with a little bit more of their farm. They could have tried bringing it in a little easier, because then they could have competed longer down the road.
All right, so you're in the NL Central, by the way, because you said you follow Milwaukee. You're up in Milwaukee. Were you surprised that the Cardinals were shut down that way by the Nationals?
The thing about the Cardinals all season is, yeah, they did look good in the NL Central, and I don't think that's too hard to do with the way the NL Central was this past year. By the way, I just want to clear up real quick. I do follow Milwaukee, but I'm actually a Chicago White Sox fan first.
Okay.
But to the point with the Cardinals is, I think anyone in the NL Central, it was going to end up being fool's gold in the playoffs. So I really wasn't that surprised. They did go on a pretty good run, but they just didn't quite have that magic of some of like the past World Series teams.
All right, so Duke Coughlin of the Who Won the Week podcast, thanks for joining us today. And you just said that you're a White Sox fan. So Tim Anderson I'm sure you covered his comments that he thought he was the next Jackie Robinson on your podcast. Did you not?
So I actually haven't, just because of how popular football season is right now, especially up here in Wisconsin with how well the Packers are playing. And I've been covering a lot of college football as well. But to that point, yeah, I think Tim said a lot of interesting stuff this season. I think when you play well, the true character of yourself really comes out. And, I can get behind, Tim saying some outlandish stuff and crazy stuff because the guy gives back a lot to the South Side of Chicago. He is someone who has really embraced the South Side, a guy who loves going to work every day. He talks about how he never watched baseball because it was boring, but with Tim Anderson out there, baseball isn't boring. So, I mean, as long as he continues to produce, the guy could say really whatever he wants, just as long as it's not detrimental to the team. You know what I mean?
Another guy on that team, because I follow him when we play them, when the Yankees play the White Sox, is Engel. I mean, the guy kept robbing the Yankees a few times, like 3 games in a row there at one point. I was very impressed by that center fielder you guys have.
Yeah, see, the thing about Adam Engel is, yeah, you do see him every once in a while when we play you guys. He has to be one of the more frustrating players that I think I've ever seen because he is such a guaranteed glove out there, but the guy is completely lost behind the plate. And I don't know if that's ever going to be something that can be coached up, but it's almost a running joke within our fan base is, like Adam Engel is our future, and Adam Engel is like this great, amazing fielder, but then you watch him bat, and it's just wow. But I think he has time to turn it around, though. I am a fan of Adam Engel. It's just, simply put, in baseball these days, especially with all the power numbers going around, you got to be able to hit.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are in football season, as you say, and because you're around the Green Bay area, I have to ask you, what's it like minus McCarthy? Aaron Rodgers just seems like a whole different player. He's healthy this year as well, but I feel like the McCarthy era really did hold him down, especially last year.
The way I see it, and I just want to prephrase this by saying that I'm a Bears fan who lives in Packers country, so.
Okay.
But I've always had the impression that you always got to stay knowledgeable of your opponent. You got to keep your friends close, your enemies closer. But the biggest thing I see with the Matt LaFleur run Packers is, just scaling it back a little bit. It's not Aaron Rodgers playing, backyard football where he has to carry this football team. They have a legit run game. They have Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, who have turned into, honestly, one of the better running back tandems. You have Devontae Adams, who is a great receiver, but honestly, when he was actually out for injury, which I'm not saying, addition by subtraction or anything, but the ball was getting spread around a lot, and the Packers offense, when you spread that ball around to different receivers, is dangerous because when you have a quarterback who is as talented as Aaron Rodgers, who is just as methodical and just an absolute killer out there, him having different options at receiver, and even with how disappointing the Jimmy Graham signing's been, the fact that he can just spread that ball around and really have a little bit more say-so in the offense to where he'll actually listen to some calls that LaFleur has, it's shown. And when you have a defense that can hold their own, I think the Adrian Amos signing for the Packers was huge. It kind of solidified that secondary a little bit, gave them some stability back there that they haven't had for a long time. And, Za'Darius and, Preston Smith, were 2 huge signings, almost like 2 of the best signings from free agency the past year. The Packers overall are built to win. And trust me, it hurt to say all that as a Bears fan who had to watch my team lose last night.
Well, let's talk about that because, by the way, Trubisky apparently tweeted years ago he was a big Packer fan, so I don't know how he ended up a Bear. But but Trubisky, watching him, again, my dad's a Chicago fan, so actually we saw him in Baltimore. We went to watch him play. We saw him last year against the Giants at the Giants Stadium. I meant Life Stadium, sorry. But it's frustrating to watch him because I don't know where his mind is on the field sometimes. He's just a flop of a draft pick at the moment.
And you obviously you get drafted number 2, and you get drafted above, guys that end up being Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, that's there. Simply put, for Mitch being drafted number 2, he has not at all, lived up to that, proceeding. But, I think the biggest thing that I've really seen, and really is the discussion of kind of Bears Twitter right now, is because, through the first 10 weeks, it was on Mitch. Everybody that watched the games were like, this guy, he just seems to be taking this step back. And it was perplexing because Mitch had a pretty good season last year. He had 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, completed 67% of his passes, and you come into this season and you just don't know what in the world happened. But I think a big tell last night was, and I watched the full game. I was angry at the end, but Mitch was really the only offensive player out there that I feel like kind of showed up. The offensive line was getting demolished by the Rams defensive front. I counted at least 6 drops last night. It just, and you watch a performance like that and you see these glimmers of like just brilliance from Mitch on some of these throws, and it starts to make you wonder, how has Matt Nagy actually developed this kid?
Well, you talk about guys who were drafted below Mitch Trubisky, in other drafts. Well, a kid named Lamar Jackson, he got drafted way low, and yet here he is killing it with the Ravens right now, and he has really proven himself, has he not?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about Lamar Jackson is, it goes a little bit more to like I was just bringing up the head coach for the Bears. John Harbaugh has done an outstanding, like John Harbaugh and Greg Roman out in Baltimore have done an outstanding job building this offense to Lamar Jackson's strengths. And I think that was like the big thing when he was coming out of the draft was, is somebody going to be able to build an offense around this guy and make him, that really highlights the great things that he does. And, exhibit A, exhibit B, and exhibit everything through week 11, man, look at Lamar Jackson. He's a world-class talent, and he's being used correctly. And when you have 2 of those things, it's a beautiful thing.
And the Ravens have been thirsting for a great quarterback. Flacco just kind of ran his course there, but Jackson just brings a different element to this team that they haven't had in a while.
Yeah, and it's almost like a grittiness too, because I remember watching the draft process and seeing, anytime they showed Lamar Jackson, like the guy has a chip, and he's had a chip since he was over at Louisville as a freshman, like, and man, that's just so big. He plays with a chip on his shoulder because, he remembers those guys that said he would be a wide receiver. He remembers those guys that said he doesn't have accuracy downfield, and, while I think, his accuracy downfield, there's still a lot of room for growth for Lamar. I think that he has more than proven his leap from year 1 to year 2, that this guy is only going to continue to get better.
What were your other takeaways from week 11? For me, it was that the Eagles actually played the Pats pretty well yesterday. I mean, they lost, but still a pretty good game.
Yeah, it was. It seemed like a longer game because I was waiting for my Sunday night game. But that being said, that's just the reality of it. Tom Brady looked rough early on. Like, he did not look, and he really never really turned it around. I mean, Julian Edelman threw the touchdown pass for the Patriots last night. It really highlighted, I think, for the Eagles that Carson Wentz right now is kind of doing everything he can to carry that team, and there's just not a lot of help around him right now. He does have a good offensive line, but, Nelson Aguilar with that drop at the end, like, holy crap. Like, he had every opportunity to catch that football. Like, that guy is looking like, Fred X 2.0.
Well, and I had not gotten the chance to see the rest of it because I was working a Seton Hall basketball game last night. They ran all over the St. Louis Billikens, which is kind of an interesting name for a team. But no, and then I actually got a Bills shirt because I'm tired of wearing the 2 quote unquote New York teams that aren't doing anything, and the Bills are doing something, and it's nice to see that they're finally riding the ship with Josh Allen up there.
Yeah, and they've given Josh Allen complete and utter confidence that he's the guy. And the Bills with the defense that they have, maybe the record looks a bit, better than it should be because of, the AFC East. But, that being said, 7-3 is nothing to sneeze at. And I think the Bills have really flown under the radar for being one of the better teams in the AFC. John Brown, who was I think like a second or third string receiver with the Arizona Cardinals a few years ago, has completely popped on the scene and turned into a darn good number one receiver for the Buffalo Bills, who, let's not forget, 2 years ago had Kelvin Benjamin starting at receiver. So this Bills turnaround, I love seeing it. I think the Buffalo Bills are one of those franchises in the NFL that when they're winning, it seems like everything's right in the NFL.
Well, it does seem like that. Hey, Duke, thank you so much for joining us today. There's so much we could cover, but I mean, just talking football and a little baseball today was great. Where can we hear your podcast? Where's it featured?
Okay, so you can actually follow me on Twitter, that pod guy Duke. That's where you're going to be able to get a lot of the updates for me. I'm on Facebook too. Just type in what we won this week. You'll be able to find me. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Google Music. I'm on
Are you on
Castbox.
Apple?
What's that?
Are you on Apple Podcasts as well?
I'm not on Apple Podcasts yet, but I'm working on it.
Cool.
I don't know why. I have had some issues with Apple Podcasts for whatever reason, trying to get things worked out, but I am doing my best to get it over there because I got a lot of iPhone users.
Well, there you go. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today, Duke Coughlin, and keep reaching out to the members of the tribe at the Mighty Network, and we'll catch up there as well.
Yeah, for sure, Alex. And I'd love to have you on the pod one of these days, man.
Let's do it. I'm Alex Garrett, and thanks for listening to this Monday edition of Keeping It Real with Alexander Garrett.